Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Ryan O'Neill.
And in this segment of Newsmaker, glad to have with us Hornell Democratic Chairman Sam Nasca, who came on to talk about his view of the governor's budget deal that was just worked out this past Monday morning, early Monday morning at the state capitol in Albany. Sam Nasca, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Brian. Always glad to be with you.
This is great, Sam. Let's go over the different things that the different upstate Republicans have talked about, starting out with the governor's treatment of AIM funding. AIM, of course, stands for Aid Incentives to Municipalities, of course, towns, villages, and cities. Your thoughts on how that was handled by Governor Cuomo, Sam?
Well, I think he's made a good case for making it up through the online sales taxes, and I think from what the numbers I've heard, it will be made up through that process.
Okay, the next big issue that came up was the governor getting a pay raise. A lot of the Albany media made a big deal about that vote coming up in the middle of the night. The governor, what's he getting? Something like $60,000 or $80,000 additionally over the next couple of years, Sam?
I think the first raise is much less than that. Eventually, it'll come to that $250,000. But let's stop for a moment and consider the New York State budget is $175 billion. And Mr. Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, has to manage that like any other company that would be have annual income of $175 billion. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. I don't think $200,000 is too much to pay a person to manage an entity that develops expenditures of $175 billion over the course of a year. It's not excessive. There's scientists, there's lawyers, there's committee heads, there's tons of people in state government that make considerably more than that. I think the leader, the governor, the administrator of the $175 billion is entitled to make at least what he's making, what they've raised his salary to.
Now, from what I understand from reading an article on this on the Democrat and Chronicle, this website, it goes from the current salary of $179,000 to $250,000 by the year 2021. Do I have that right?
You do have that right.
Now, I have to say both the liberal and conservative media outlets were tough on the governor, but the governor, I think from what I can tell, he doesn't court reporters, and in turn he gets, the treatment that the reporters sometimes will give when they're not treated just so.
Well, I think the media is seeking what's important, what's up front as far as reporting to their constituency on budget issues. Budget issues are always very much in the forefront of news, the news media. And
yeah, I guess what they objected to was that it was the pay raise was passed at 2-something in the morning, I guess.
Yes. But again, the genesis for this whole ability of the governor to inject late issues into the budget is its genesis comes from the Pataki legal challenge that he was successful in getting, which gives the governor an opportunity to change things over and above the legislature. So maybe the blame for this comes from a previous administration.
Okay, talking with Sam Nasca, Hornell Democrat chairman, who works for the Hornell IDA and also the United Transportation Union out of Albany. So Sam is very much in the loop there and has a good grasp of what's going on in state politics and the national level as well. Sam, the DREAM Act. That was also passed as part of the budget. The DREAM Act, basically what it does, and correct me if I'm wrong or leaving anything out, it gives free college tuition to the illegal or undocumented immigrants, depending on what you want to call them.
That's correct. That's been in the legislature's sights for several years. There's been a bill in there on both sides. Both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, because of a number of members of the legislature's feeling, and I agree with it, that there's ability to people that can make a contribution to our society and further their own ability to excel in this world of ours. I think it's a reasonable piece of legislation, and I feel that it will benefit all of us in the future as these people make useful lives of themselves and further our economy by their future seeking jobs that will benefit our society.
Now, upstate Republicans have argued against the DREAM Act for some time, saying it's not fair to the people who lived here already because they have to pay to go to college, and then they have to pay for someone else to go to college who's from elsewhere, another state or another country, depending on the situation. What would the Democrats say to that argument, Sam Nasca?
The people that are here already have the ability to go to college free of tuition. That's already a legislative piece that passed previously. So we do have free college for residents in New York State already.
Talking to Sam Nasca here on the Newsmaker Show. He's Hornell Democratic chairman. Another big issue for the Republicans that was in the budget was the fact that the governor's going to be closing down 3 prisons. So there's going to be 3 prison closures, not just 2. And the upstate Republicans were arguing that this is unfair to the people who work in the prison guard jobs and that it's a public safety issue. What would supporters of Governor Andrew Cuomo like yourself say, Sam?
The issue of the closing of prisons has been going on for the past decade, and I understand the issues of the upstate legislative leaders that are concerned about these closures because they do include jobs. They're all of the prisons that probably are scheduled or will be scheduled for closure results in a significant number of loss of jobs for the area, city, town, community where they're located, and I recognize that, and it's an issue for many of my constituents, my labor union members who work in those prisons. But on the other hand, I guess you can say, if we don't need them, why do we want to continue the economic burden of operating them if we can get along safely and sufficiently without them? So, I mean, it really doesn't matter where prisoners are located as long as they're incarcerated appropriately where they are sent. So, again, there's 2 sides to this argument or issue, and I recognize both sides of it. But on the other hand, like I say, if they're not needed, if they're an economic burden to the state, maybe there's justification for closing them. Incidentally, he hasn't identified any prisons to be closed at the present time. So I don't think we can make a judgment on the closure of them until we know who they are, and where they're located.
Talking to Hornell Democratic Chairman Sam Nasca. Sam, another issue that came up, and this is a criminal justice issue as well, is bail reform. I'm not sure if this was something the governor pushed for, or maybe it came from the Assembly leadership or State Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins in the State Senate on the Democrat side. But bail reform, from what I understand from Livingston County Sheriff Tom Doherty, they won't be holding suspects after the original arrest if the suspects are charged with second-degree burglary and second-degree robbery. Also, I think selling heroin is in there. Is that correct, Sam?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, your thoughts on the bail reform legislation?
Well, I think it makes sense. Why incarcerate people for minor crimes that if they're not a deterrent to society and the locations where they are? I mean, they again, that's another economic obligation that isn't necessary if they're not a threat to the areas where they are located. They certainly deserve the consideration that this legislation gives them, and I don't think it's as some people will characterize it, and that is that these people are somehow vicious criminals that'll do bad things to the location where they are. I think that a lot of these things are minor drug issues like marijuana possession or things like that, and they don't need to be incarcerated until their cases come up.
Sam Nasca, another criminal justice. This doesn't affect the public so much. This is more of a government and media relationship issue. No mugshot photos for the media. I don't hear a lot of people complaining about that. In fact, Kevin Doran used to say that mugshots were kind of unfair because it makes you automatically look guilty and takes away the whole innocent until proven guilty thing.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, because I can think, it's unfortunate that we have these kind of issues, that we have the issues that we have to confront with certain elected officials being charged. But going back in my memory, and I go back a ways, a lot of people wound up being innocent. So, yes, that the mugshots do present the perspective, the thoughts that these people are absolutely guilty, and I think it does affect their stature in the community.
Yeah, I always felt it created an incriminating image, and I was usually pretty slow. If you go through to post those online, if you go through WLEA.net, you're going to find almost no mugshots. Talking with Sam Nasca, Democrat chairman for the city of Hornell. What about the issue of pay raises being stifled, or no pay raises for those who work with the developmentally disabled? I was a little unclear on that issue.
The pay raises for the governor and lieutenant governor were issues that I feel are appropriate because, again, $175 billion budget, and with all of the departments and agencies that are overseen by the governor's office is a reasonable compensation package for the governor or anyone like him. Who is responsible for that kind of economic output for a year. Like I say, there's so many people in state government, scientists, how about school board superintendents throughout the state that make $400,000 or $500,000 and $600,000. I think a comparison is reasonable for somebody running an entity like state government.
talking with Sam Nasca. We're going to ask one more question before we take the break on the budget. Then we'll come back and we'll talk the Muller Report and the Democrat candidates for the presidency. I wanted to ask one issue. This is kind of a minor issue. It sounded like it was going to be kind of a big issue that would affect a lot of people at first, the plastic bag ban, but all that turns out to be is replacing grocery store plastic bags with paper bags. When I first heard it, I thought, garbage bags, but that's not what they went for this time. Sam, do you think the environmentalists in New York City and Albany will pressure for ultimately no plastic bags under any conditions, or how far is that going to go?
Well, I don't think this is the end of the plastic prohibition. Of course, this one here goes on for a year before it gets to be a real serious issue for grocery entities. But they will push for a complete ban on plastic bags. Does it create issues? It sure does. But you can always take your reusable grocery bags that you have permanently to the grocery store and help the environment by putting your groceries in your own containers. I don't think it's too much to ask. There are a lot of that plastic in every place you go, every dump, every garbage disposal. They are a burden to environment.
We're talking with Hornell Democratic Chairman Sam Nasca. Going to take a quick break, check the forecast with Rob. We'll be back. Stay there.
You don't have to travel far for the highest quality imaging services. St. James has you covered. We have a full range of services, including X-ray at 2 convenient locations: mammography, ultrasound, MRI, bone density, echocardiogram, stress echo, and nuclear medicine. Quick appointments, friendly service, great technology, Gold Seal accreditation, and the backing of the University of Rochester imaging experts. So the next time your doctor orders an imaging test, choose St. James Hospital. Learn more at stjames.urmc.edu/imaging.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carolyn. Rob, a little cool out there this morning. When's it warm up?
It's going to be a while before we keep the warm air around for any great length of time, Brian. The reason being, this time of year, our source region for cold air is eastern Canada, Quebec and Ontario, and there's still an awful lot of snow on the ground up there, so it's very easy for it to get cold. I'm looking at temperatures this morning north of Ottawa in the teens, and some of that cold air is bleeding southward towards us. It's actually picking up some moisture coming off of Lake Huron and Lake Ontario. And
You sure it's not eastern Siberia?
I'm sure, because if it was eastern Siberia, it'd be even colder than we are this morning. It'd probably be about 5 below. So it's not eastern Siberia, but it's cold enough, and it is picking up some cloudiness, the lake effect cloudiness, kind of drifting over parts of the southern tier, coming down from Buffalo through Dansville and all the way on into the Binghamton area this morning. So if you're south of that line, you're into some sun. If you're along the line, you're into some cloudiness. But that's going to be the story today. We'll go back and forth between clouds and some sun. We're about 45 to 50. Sun came up this morning at 6:46. It'll set tonight at 7:40 p.m. Now, we've got low pressure moving out of the Midwest tonight. It's going to lead to rain. That rain may be mixed with a little bit of sleet and snow. Lows tonight around 30. Again, yesterday we talked about this. Watch the bridge decks, the overpasses, any elevated roads late tonight, early tomorrow morning. They could have the tendency to become a little bit slick. Tomorrow, rainy, breezy, milder, 50 to 55. The rain ends tomorrow night. We're 40 to 45. Saturday, we turn partly sunny and we warm up, Brian. We're 55 to 60.
Back with Hornell Democratic Chairman Sam Nasca. Sam, before I get to the Muller Report and before I get to the list of Democrat candidates going for the White House, I wanted to ask you a question about Congresswoman Alexandria OcasioCortez. Most of the conservative commentators have nothing good to say about her. So I thought, hey, I'll give you a chance to defend her. There's a lot of attacks on her. What do you like about Congresswoman OcasioCortez?
Well, the jury's still out as far as I'm concerned, but she, I think, is pushing a little too hard on her agenda, because some of her agenda is kind of over the top. She won this seat from a long-time seasoned member of Congress who I know and knew from the days he was here in New York as a member of the Assembly. She won that seat strictly because Joe Crowley moved out of the district. He established his residence in Washington, and that was the issue that put her over the top in her elections. Crowley was probably in line for getting one of the leadership posts in the current House of Representatives, but like I say, his lack of residing in the district caused a defeat. But she is a little over the top and trying to further her agenda. I know it's extensive, and it does contain environmental issues and a lot of things like that. But I think she should walk before she runs and tone that agenda down a little bit, because she will have successes, but some of the issues that she's supporting are a little bit over the top.
The Democrat candidates running for the White House, do you have a favorite at this point, Sam?
I do not. There are so many that I think it's going to have to be sorted out by their campaign activities, their position papers, their media coverage, and I think for any Democrat at this point to set their sights on one is probably being premature. I think we need to see what they all have to offer. There's some good ones, and there's some that I would rather not see be the candidate. But I think we need to reflect on their capabilities over the next probably 18 months.
The coverage that former Vice President Joe Biden is getting these days about, on the Me Too issue, what do you make of all that?
Well, he's had two accusers, I guess if you could call it that. From what I've seen from the videos of at least one of these instances, I don't think there's a lot to it, but until he was an announced candidate, they probably wouldn't even have followed up on this. But now that he's an announced candidate, two issues like this are great fodder, and I guess they're going to get some legs and some traction, and we'll see where it goes.
How about the Muller Report? And that's my final question for you, Sam Nasca. Your thoughts on the Muller Report, what's been released so far, and what we know?
Well, I think the demand by the House of Representatives and the leadership in the House of Representatives is reasonable, and I think the American people should see all of it. And unless the redacted issues are serious security issues, I think that the American people should see it all. It's their right. It's 22 months of activities by the Muller investigating team. There's been a lot of issues raised. We've had so many people charged and convicted, and so some of the issues that are connected with those convictions, I think the American people are in their right to demand to see, and I'd like to see the full report issued and made public to the constituency.
Well, it was our pleasure today to talk with Hornell Democratic Chair Sam Nasca. Wanted to get him on because there's been a lot of criticism of the governor's of office lately in terms of the budget, and in the interest of being fair, always hope to have a Democrat come on and get their side of the story on, which you did very well, Sam. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Brian. Always a pleasure to be with you.